Good Saturday afternoon, everybody. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to the Hurricane Hub discussion for May 27th, 2023, Saturday. And since you know it's a Saturday, it is the day for our countdowns to the hurricane season. And indeed, this will be the last day that we do countdowns till the beginning of the hurricane season, because look how many days we have left. 5 days left till the start of the hurricane season. So by next Saturday, we would already be at June 3rd, and we would already be into the hurricane season. So this is our last countdown, and it just goes to show how far we've come when it comes to counting down the days till the season. It really just goes to show how much time has passed, and hurricane season is upon us. That's all I could say about that. Really quickly, though, I want to mention Typhoon Mawar, still a super typhoon as of the latest outlook. Of course, especially compared to a few days ago, 2 days ago, when this was an absolute beast, monster, complete monster, I should say. It's definitely weakened a little bit, as to be expected. Storms, especially at the strength that Mawar probably was when it reached its full intensity, probably somewhere 190, 195 miles an hour. That's some talk between some people, especially that follow this really closely. Some even, I believe, say 200 was the peak for Mawar. But bottom line, it's definitely weakened. You could see it's becoming a little more ragged, especially its eye on the satellite, so it's weakened. But as of the latest advisory, it is still indeed a super typhoon, so it is weakening. And we actually look at the latest advisory right now on CIMS tropical cyclones, and yeah, they have it at 120 knots. So actually, not quite a super typhoon anymore, unless this is the latest one. But at least the last position of this was as of 12 UTC. So I guess is this for what? This is for 12 UTC. Oh, this is their 12-hour forecast. So this is the initial position as it is right now, and it still is at 130 knots. So this is expected still as a super typhoon, but expected to weaken probably down to below major hurricane strength, at least from what it seems from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, expecting it within the next 2 days probably to weaken below major hurricane strength, and we'll probably see the end of that. And luckily, as it has been basically throughout this whole entire run with this storm, except for a moment for Guam, although it did not hit Guam at its peak intensity. But generally, besides that, what I'm trying to say is that this was no impact to land. So good on that front that we kind of could just watch it out in the open ocean and not worry about it bringing devastating impacts to anywhere else. So that is definitely a good aspect to it. But there is also something in the Atlantic, and I'm pretty sure you're all aware, and you take a look at our thumbnail too. I mentioned it. There's a non-tropical low off the Carolina coast, and indeed this is, and I did tell you about this a few days ago, this is indeed bringing gusty winds and heavy rain to the Carolinas. Will probably do so all weekend and bring, unfortunately, nasty and miserable weather, especially to those that were hoping to enjoy Memorial Day weekend. Unfortunately, kind of have to put those plans on hold. Maybe conditions will get better throughout the weekend, because we still got Sunday tomorrow, and we also got Monday as well. So maybe things will get a little better as we go into the weekend. This low is expected to move in sometime tonight or early Sunday, and of course it is disorganized, and it is expected to remain frontal, because there is absolutely no chance of this forming, at least per the National Hurricane Center. We go here, there's absolutely no chance they have this of developing. 0% chance, near 0% chance that they expect this to develop. The conditions are not really that favorable, and of course it is really expected to move inland over the next several hours, probably by tomorrow early morning max. Although I will say, though, if you take a look at the satellite, this is it. There is a front kind of associated with this, although at least if you look at it this morning, it actually did look pretty good. This is the low level center, and indeed there is a low level center, since this is some sort of extratropical system. And I guess you would be willing to say, if things were a little more favorable, and this did have at least another 24 or 48 hours over land, that this might have tried. especially take a look at the frames earlier. There was quite a bit of convective bursts over where the low level center was, so it did indeed look pretty decent this morning. But as I said, and you could also take a look at the convection now kind of dying out, so it does kind of show unfavorable conditions within this area, and the fact that it just has too little time. So any worries about this becoming subtropical or anything in development nature nameable, we're not really expecting that. But of course, heavy rain, gusty winds, and we'll go touch upon that a little bit later on, in fact. But I did hear a little bit about gusty winds potentially up to 50 knots that were reported just off the coast of the Carolinas this morning. So this is indeed very much a nuisance, and is still bringing impacts despite the fact that this is not a tropical or subtropical system. Though, let's take a look at a wider view now. See, of course, that area off the Carolinas coast, and then there's a lot more. Although, is there really, though? I guess you could say there's a lot more in terms of cloud cover, but nothing in terms of anything that's actually developing. You still see those very strong upper level winds, strong wind shear, and that is still remaining the case, and even in the eastern Pacific as well. Although I guess I could say that there's a little bit less of it there, but still, the bottom line is that it's kind of unfavorable for anything to develop right now, and going into the rest of the month and into early next month, not really looking at anything to develop. So we're good for the next few days, probably the next week or two. We're looking good. So would not be concerned about development for now. And of course, another thing to look at is a bunch of these low-level clouds across the Atlantic, very indicative of dry air, and still showing the fact that we're going to see some time before things begin to change in terms of favoring the Atlantic. So, but before we go on, why not have a look at Africa, since that is also relevant to Atlantic development. And kind of, I guess the frame kind of stops right at 10 west, and this is where it shows nothing very strong off the coast of Africa, but actually sent it a little bit far, right near the 0 degree line. Forgot what that line is called, but not gonna bother trying to guess it now. But what I'm trying to say, looking at a little bit further into Africa, you could actually see there's a strong tropical wave right now off the west coast, probably near Nigeria. I would assume so. So probably heavy rains going on over there. And of course, within the next few days, would expect this. Probably 1, 2, maybe 3 days max, give it, and this will probably emerge off the west coast of Africa. But of course, as I did mention, unfavorable conditions for right now, and especially given the time of year, and of course, strong wind shear. Would expect this to kind of not develop and not become any much of a concern, since of course it is only May and heading into early June, so of course it wouldn't be of much concern anyway. Moving on, though, as we always would do in these Saturday outlooks, as I always like to do, sea surface temperature anomaly time, and basically the same picture we've been looking at for the last few weeks. Very, very warm Atlantic, and kind of really still shocked at how warm it's been able to maintain, or how long it's been able to maintain the warmth that it has. Really just goes to show how phenomenal of a year it is. And then take a look at the Caribbean as well, very warm, and I'll actually show graphs on that as well. And the Gulf kind of did up well, I believe, a little bit in the Northern Gulf, fronts moving through. So the Northern Gulf did cool down a little bit, but it is still very warm overall, and it's still very much above normal. Eastern Pacific, the tropical Eastern Pacific, very warm. Off the coast of South America, still very warm. Expected developing El Nino. And we could actually take a look at the SOI and the Nino 3.4 index in a little bit. But still, the bottom line, very warm in the ENSO regions as well. Slowly beginning to get there towards El Nino like we are expecting. But very interestingly enough, still cold off the Baja Peninsula, and that's still something we need to watch. Although it has kind of been warming up there as of recently as well, but still something interesting to take of note. The average, though, for the last 30 days for the SOI, though, whether or not we actually are heading into El Nino, it is kind of a certainty that we are now. And you can just take a look at the SOI for that. We're at negative 13 points. And as I talked about before, if you remember, how I always mentioned that the rule of thumb that I always like to look at for the SOI is -7. And we're at -13, so we're almost double the criteria that we need in order for the SOI to kind of give us a hint that we're beginning to respond, like El Nino. And the SOI, generally how it works is the measurement of the pressure patterns in the equatorial Pacific, which kind of gives us an indication of how trade winds are along the equatorial Pacific, in positive meaning more of pressure patterns along the equatorial Pacific favorable for stronger trades in the Pacific, and negative, of course, being the opposite. And we're very much negative now. So El Nino is definitely beginning to respond in the atmosphere, although the 90-day average is still at negative 5.6, but we're getting there, and we probably will get there slowly. And of course, with the SOI also comes the sea surface temperature anomalies, and that is also also beginning to respond as well. Seeing the threshold right near zero point 0.5 did cool down from a few days ago, probably a week or two ago. Did cool down a little bit, but of course won't be exactly consistent with sea surface temperature anomalies. Bottom line, we're generally at or near the zero point 0.5 degrees Celsius line, so we're starting to get towards El Nino, barely on the border, and will be more or less in a solid El Nino come within the next 2 to 3 months. So no worry about whether or not El Nino is happening or not. Of course, the concern and really the thing that we need to keep in mind is how strong does this get and how fast does it take to get strong? How strong will it get in a quick amount of time is the thing we need to watch. But also, of course, and something that I've really been trying to mention to everybody is the Atlantic MDR, and that being very warm. And just take a look at it. The Atlantic MDR, just this past day or so, we've reached past the 0.8 degrees Celsius threshold in the MDR. Once again, the warmest it's been since early May. So we're definitely getting back there, and I think part of that is to blame for the Caribbean. This is a different map. This is the Atlantic MDR, and this is the Caribbean. And really quickly, just going back to the Caribbean map, you could really see how many oranges and yellows were starting to get there now. Before, we were kind of more towards the zero line, more towards the Caribbean being a little more neutral in its sea surface temperature anomalies. Now, look at it now. We've sparked way up, and we're now at past 0.7 degrees Celsius above normal in the Caribbean. So a lot of warming up occurring in the Caribbean now. And that'll also be interesting to see how that sort of impacts things. But I guess more or less it would, add on to the MDR being warm, since at least with the graph that I'm using, this Atlantic MDR graph that I'm using includes 10 to 20 north, of course, that's the MDR, and 20 to 85 west. So this includes the Eastern Atlantic and the Caribbean, and that's what they use for their MDR calculations. But I guess the bottom line, the Atlantic is very warm, and of course, as I talked about, the Gulf of Mexico, that beginning to cool down a little bit, but probably in association with fronts over the last few weeks. So wouldn't really worry about that. But let's take a look really quickly at the Gulf sea surface temperatures, the actual sea surface temperatures, and just want to kind of show you really quickly to get an idea, a context of what the map is showing. This is right here. Take a look at the key, because that'll be very important, especially when it comes to looking at this. And you can see right here, this deep blue, that's already 25.7 degrees Celsius. And look how little deep blue we have in the Gulf. We only have this portion off the northern Gulf Coast, right near the peninsula, the panhandle of Florida. That is right in the 26, 25 degrees Celsius mark. And then look at the rest of the Gulf. We're at the greens, we're at maybe some light blues, but that's mainly the northern Gulf. And then the rest of the Gulf after that is the greens. And by the time we're already into the kind of lighter green, we're at 28 degrees Celsius. And that's already encompassing most of the central Gulf. So whether or not the Gulf is favorable for tropical cyclone development, that's already a done deal, that the Gulf is warm enough and favorable for tropical cyclone development, and kind of will be throughout the whole entire season. Of course, climatology wise, we're definitely warmer in the Gulf of Mexico, and of course summertime heating would also help with warming the shelf waters as well, which we kind of have yet to see. But that is of no concern. The Gulf will always be warm no matter what, especially as we get towards July, August, and September. No concern about sea surface temperatures there. Really, of course, it's just a matter of whether or not things are favorable, and taking advantage of things in atmospheric wise, of course. Off the southeast coast, though, and I would expect, of course, since we do have quite a sizable storm off the southeast coast, as I did mention before, it is non-tropical, but of course, it did bring some pretty gusty winds, so I would expect maybe some upwelling to occur off the southeast coast, although sea surface temperatures there 26 and 27 degrees Celsius near the coast along the shelf waters, though it is still indeed kind of cold, anywhere between, I would say, 21 and 24 degrees Celsius right along the coastline, so they have definitely some warming to do. Although, as I would say, and especially given this year, if you remember, the subtropics being a lot colder, especially in response to this very warm MDR. In turn, it actually is a very favorable signal indeed for a more large scale factor in the Atlantic. But in turn, as I did mention, the subtropics are definitely cooler. So I guess that would kind of explain a little bit of why it's not as warm off the southeast coast, but I would definitely imagine as we get into June and July, that area would warm up tremendously, and we'll see things a lot more favorable for things to get going off the southeast coast then. But really quickly, did want to mention, of course, about the area off the southeast coast. As I did mention before, a lot of heavy rain and high winds, gusty winds, and I did say probably maybe a little bit of upwelling of shelf waters too along the along the Carolinas coast, and maybe the influence of that system is also kind of bringing some colder air into the Gulf, which is why we're seeing a decrease in sea surface temperature anomalies. This map right here, maybe the influence of that. I don't know. Maybe the influence of that is kind of cooling off the northern Gulf a little bit, but once again, not really much of my concern. But of course, this is my concern when it comes to rainfall along the Carolinas. A moderate chance for excessive rainfall. This is the day one outlook. So for today, excessive rainfall at least 40%. That's a moderate chance. And of course, we always mention, especially when it comes to tropical cyclone development. Of course, this is not going to be a tropical cyclone or subtropical cyclone. But as I always mention, sometimes when we talk about impacts, and the very big impact that a lot of people tend to forget is rainfall, flooding, and storm surge as well, all part of the same category. Water. A lot of people tend to think about the wind, and the wind component is certainly something to watch. Even in this case too, it's a non-tropical system, but it's bringing gusty winds as well. But rainfall is always the big factor that a lot of people tend to forget, and when we especially see high amounts of it in instances like Harvey and Florence, we saw a lot of rainfall, and that's what especially did most of the damage, especially in the Houston area where we got 60 inches of rainfall, a lot of damage, a lot of flooding there, and the actual Category 4 part of Harvey made landfall in rural southern Texas. So the rainfall is something that really needs to be watched, and that's one big thing that we're going to see along the Carolinas coast this weekend. Non-stop rain. And I could show you right here. This is the Weather Prediction Center rainfall rates for the next 7 days. Look at that, right off the North Carolina coast. Upwards of 4, 5, 6, even 7 inches of rainfall locally in some areas. So a lot of rain expected there. Flash flooding, all that, gotta deal with it before we talk about this, then moving off and maybe conditions beginning to clear. So even though this is not really much of a system to watch for tropical development, this will certainly bring its share of impacts, certainly, as well. And I mean, you could just take a look at the models really quickly, and you can see it there moving inland roughly around Sunday, 12Z. So this is Sunday morning. This moves inland, and if you do remember, we looked at the satellite picture earlier. This did actually have some sort of organization associated with it. So I guess begging the question whether or not if this was right for the NHC to mention, because I did see that there's a little bit of a debate on whether or not the NHC should have mentioned this in their outlook at all. I guess it was right, since it did have some sort of organization with it, and of course to bring awareness to this system as well. But then you could see why we're not really expecting development. You just kind of for next 18 to 24 hours, nothing really gets too tight. Although there's a lot of vorticity, it doesn't really get tight enough. And especially with the short amount of time, 24 hours, it's already inland, and then 36, and then the next 48 hours, it kind of stalls out, and that'll probably add on to the additional rainfall, not only along the coast, but maybe some inland as well, so watch for that. And that way, now we're heading into Monday, and then we're into Tuesday of next week, and then we kind of see this die out over the southeast, and then after that, nothing much going on, although I did see a little bit of talk about maybe another signal trying to dip down, maybe some sort of mesoscale convective system dips down. Hold on, let me see. Did I change the model run? I don't think so. Hopefully not. But as I did mention before, some sort of mesoscale convective system kind of comes off. You see right here from Texas, kind of comes off into the northern Gulf. Some talk of maybe something trying to get going. I don't know. But it does move on. It does kind of stay along the northern Gulf Coast, and then it kind of lingers around, but nothing really tries to develop. And then by that time, we're by by hour 168, day 7, and we're here at Saturday, June 3rd. Yeah, so already within the next week, we'll be in June, and not really looking at much in terms of development in the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific. Why not mention that as well? And in the Eastern Pacific, see what the model has. Indeed, nothing there as well. It doesn't really look like it. Yeah, nothing in the Eastern Pacific as well. So nothing to go around in both basins. And that is to be expected, of course, as I did mention. It's late May, early June. So it will take some time. It's not always going to happen in the snap of a finger. It doesn't mean as soon as it turns June 1st, hurricanes will just start spitting out of the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific. It doesn't work like that. The atmosphere takes time to adjust, and especially in a year like this where we get El Nino, especially for the Atlantic, it will take a little bit of time. But the Eastern Pacific too, it's going to take some time. But eventually, as I always like to stress, eventually the activity will come. We'll just have to wait and see and be patient for when it does. Very interestingly, though, and very important as well, and also very interesting in the fact of this prediction that the UK Met Office released. The United Kingdom, this is the Met Office from there. They usually release a prediction every single year, and they just released one for the 2023 hurricane season this year, and this is for their forecast for June to November 2023. Of course, that's the hurricane season, and they just released this yesterday, actually, and kind of already got a snippet of what I showed, but this is actually kind of stirring up a little bit of controversy in the weather community, because look at their forecasts that they released. Quite an aggressive one. The most likely scenario that they're giving is 20 named storms and a range of 14 to 26. They have a very aggressive forecast. That's for the named storms. The hurricane frequency, 8 to 14, with the most likely at 11. So very aggressive indeed. And then just look at the major hurricane count. They have a range of 3 to 7, with the most likely of 5. And probably the biggest one yet, I would say, and the most very impressive, is the ACE index, with a range of 137, with the long-term average, of course, being 121, to a whopping 307. Now, if we get that 307, which I highly doubt we'll even reach ever in the next few years, of course, probably, or who knows, maybe it does happen, I don't know, but I highly doubt it's going to happen anytime soon. A whopping 307 would basically shatter all the records that exist right now for ACE in the Atlantic. So if that happens, that would be very interesting, but they have the most likely at 222, which is still very impressive and still pretty crazy, especially given the circumstances for this year. But I guess maybe this forecast makes a little bit of sense because they're using the UK Met model and the European model, I believe, for these forecasts, and they have been notoriously very aggressive this year, especially considering if you remember us talking about the UK Met and the European forecasts for the Atlantic this year, especially when it comes to precipitation anomalies, them showing a lot of high precipitation rate over the MDR and the Atlantic in general this year. So maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe that's why they're kind of factoring in this and kind of coming up with a very aggressive forecast. And yes, if you're wondering, this is more aggressive than the University of Arizona forecast that they released in April. Released it. That's an interesting word. Maybe I should use that more. I don't know. But you get what I mean. This is the most aggressive forecast basically out of the bunch so far. Mostly everybody else, including the NOAA too, was only forecasting a near to slightly above normal season. The UK Met, they're really going at it and saying it's going to be either a slightly above normal season or a record-shattering off the charts season, which I believe is very interesting. Although, if we take a look at the methodology that they use, I assume they probably use the European model when it comes to this. So probably that's why. But still would take it a grain of salt, because especially given this year, unless things really kind of show us off how, unless the Atlantic really shows off, and I guess it is maybe very like 1% chance possible, because if you want to think about it, if we looked at the Eastern Pacific last year, the Eastern Pacific was actually quite active, and last year was a La Nina. I believe the Eastern Pacific got like 19 named storms, something like that, and they, of course, were in a La Nina, a moderate one, and they also had other underlying factors that were not so favorable for them as well, and they still got a very active season. So maybe you could say the opposite could occur in the Atlantic this year, where, of course, given the Atlantic is very warm, the Eastern Pacific was also cold, not just the La Nina factor as well, but the Eastern Pacific, the PDO was very cold in the Pacific as well, and they still ended up having a very active season there relative to what was expected. The Atlantic is very warm this year, and maybe it could counteract the developing El Nino and end up trying to pull a fast one on us. And who knows, maybe we'll end up getting 220 ace or something like that, like the 307 ace or something like the European is forecasting. Who knows, maybe that happens and the Atlantic pulls a fast one on us. Kind of be a coincidence or some kind of ironic, since last year everybody was saying the Atlantic would be so active and it ended up being near normal. Maybe this year everybody's like, oh, the Atlantic will be and we end up seeing it very active and very hyperactive indeed, because 307 and even 222, that is very active, and not often do we get that in the Atlantic, but who knows, we'll see. But speaking, since next week is the start of June, and if you've been following me for long enough, you know I like to do a tradition of doing a live stream to kind of kick off things for the first day of the hurricane season, and that's what I'm doing. Day 1 on June 1st, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 6 p.m. Central. And tell your friends, tell your family about it. Tell everybody to tune in. I'm going to do a live stream for, I believe, 2 hours or so. That's what I usually do, 2 hours. We're going to include new predictions for the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific, and hurricane discussions as well. Talking about what we personally expect, me and probably some other people. I'm going to try to convince others to join that I know, but it's still, of course, in the works for that. And we're going to have fun trivia as well, because, we also got to have some fun with this to kind of lighten up the mood, because not everything has to always be, very strict and very serious all the time. Sometimes you need some fun, so we'll include that as well. But that is for next week, June 1st, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, hurricane season 2023. And then the following day, I believe I'll be very busy for the whole entire day, so I'll probably not post a video the next day. But June 1st, brain fart. June 1st, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Join us then. And subscribe if you want. If you want to get the notification for that, subscribe if you have not already done so. And tell your family and friends about it. Let's enjoy, and let's hopefully kick things off Very nice, very greatly, very strongly for this hurricane season, hoping to do that. And of course, hoping to continue a tradition that I kind of started almost in this channel, kind of doing live discussions every single June, which I did find to be very fun, and I look forward to doing it again this year. And I could hope that all of you guys out there that are watching could join as well. But that's going to wrap up the discussion for today. Gonna post tomorrow, hopefully, but probably will not post on Monday since Monday is Memorial Day weekend. And then we'll probably resume to posting Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, but definitely Thursday before I go live. And then Thursday, of course, 7 p.m. Remember that, Eastern time. If you're in a different time zone, Central at 6, I believe Mountain time would be 5. And then if you're along the West Coast, it'll be 4 o'clock. So depending on whether or not you could join, I mean, we'll be going on for the entire evening as well, for a good 2 hours or so. I believe that's what I usually do. 2 hours or so will probably be going on from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, and then after that, we will indeed end. But of course, we'll have a decent live stream. So if you can't join at the beginning, you'll probably be able to hopefully join us at some point, because we'll be on for a while. But with that being said, I'm going to close off for today's discussion. I'm going to get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay safe, of course. If you like what you saw, please like, subscribe, especially subscribe for next week, and share with family and friends. And stay safe. Enjoy, and we'll see you again later.